Heather Finley. Heather's my friend. We were talking before we got online about I've been trying to say Dr. Finley, Dr. Finley, and if you were on our webinar last month, I stuttered over it 4 times because Heather and I are friends and we go back way back. So Heather said, quit worrying about it and just call me Heather. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Heather Finley. She's a registered dietitian. She has a doctorate in clinical nutrition. She helps people who are struggling with bloating and constipation and IBS find relief from their symptoms and be excited about food again. Heather is also an excellent eating disorder clinician. She knows her way around the eating disorder world well, and presents on eating disorders and the gut often. So we're so happy to have Heather with us today. And Heather, I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share, and let you go ahead and do yours.
Okay, awesome.
And
So glad to be here. We are having weather confusion as well. I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth. It was 95 degrees the other day, and I think it's like 50 today. So that's Texas weather for you, but I am
Heather,
so happy to be here.
I see your screen just fine. I just wanted to let you know I'm going to mute and stop my video.
Okay,
But if you need me, holler and I'll pop back on. Otherwise, I'll see you at the end for Q&A.
perfect.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. I made the mistake last time of telling everybody to tell me in the chat where they were joining me from and what their profession was, and then realized that nobody had access to the chat. So if you want to reach out, I'd love to hear from you and see who's on this presentation. Of course, I wish that we could all be in person, all 600 of you. That would be amazing. Go ahead and message me on Instagram. Tell me that you're here. I'd love to get to know you a little bit more about what you do, and just put a face to a name. So really, really excited to be here. If you were joining us last month, we talked a bit about digestive dilemmas and how to navigate those. We focused a lot on food-based suggestions and things that we can do. And today we are moving beyond the plate. So really excited to build on what we already discussed. But even if you weren't here last month, you are not behind. These are two separate things, but you can definitely go back and listen. So I know I've shared many different stories on all the different webinars that I have done for Center for Change specifically, but I thought that the story that I would share today would be related to this one client that I had actually not that long ago. So as Tamara mentioned, I run a program called Gut Together, and we help women struggling with GI issues from all over the world. And most of our clients have actually had a history of either disordered eating or an eating disorder. And we had this client who had gone through eating disorder treatment and found really, really great success during that time. She went to treatment, then did outpatient, kind of did the normal progression that you might see in your practice. But what happened after was a couple years later, she was plagued with GI issues and she was super confused. And thankfully, she had actually gone through eating disorder treatment because she was researching online. Okay, what do I do? And everything that was coming up was food restriction. She got blog articles and whatever else online telling her to do low FODMAP, telling her to do, AIP, all the different elimination diets. I could list them all, but you probably know at this point. And she decided that doesn't seem like a good idea for me because of my history, but I also don't know what else to do. And so she had actually started following me on Instagram. We were chatting back and forth, and her main concern was, can I improve my GI issues without restricting food? She had been told by a naturopath and several other clinicians that she would have to go on a restrictive diet due to her symptoms. And I told her there is a way to do this without restricting food. So we started working together, but it actually really did take a lot of unwiring of these beliefs because of what's going on in mainstream media about IBS and GI issues and how, inflammatory certain foods are. I'm using quotes, obviously, for that. And there's no one size fits all when it comes to GI. And most of the time when people have GI issues, it's way beyond food. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today and how we can support our clients. I'm sure if you have worked with clients that have GI issues, they have significant food fear, maybe they have food refusal. Um, Sometimes if they're struggling with an eating disorder and GI issues, it can be easy to just kind of pack on the medications, which for sure have a time and place. But when we fix one problem, we might be causing another. You might see non-compliance. It's really hard to follow a meal plan if your stomach hurts all the time. There might be worsening stomach pain, and just GI symptoms of all kind can co-occur with eating disorders and disordered eating. So some of the potential impacts that we see when someone is struggling with both is food tolerance. And this could be from an immune standpoint. Maybe they have immune reactivity to food due to what's going on in their gut, or they just don't tolerate food because of the bloating, gas, et cetera, that it's causing, which those things definitely go together. It can lead to painful and disheartening meals. It's really hard to eat if you feel uncomfortable. And then that can really impact motivation and mindset, which, as you know, as a clinician, is a huge part of recovery. If someone's constantly thinking, I can never get better, I don't want to do this, this is impossible, then that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy and can make treatment really hard. So whether you are a dietitian, a doctor, a therapist, health coach, whatever you are, this takes a team. And so I am so glad that you're here. We all have to work together on this to help clients have improvement. So I want you to think about, have you had one or possibly many clients that you have seen that struggled with GI issues while in treatment? Whether you work in outpatient, whether you work in treatment, have you had one or many? And I want you to think about that case as we are talking today to see how maybe some of these things could apply to the client that you have in mind. And then the next question I have is, do you feel unsure of how to address the eating disorder versus the gut complaints? That's the biggest thing that I see with clinicians that I work with in some of my mentorship programs is it's like, at what point do we just focus on the disordered eating? And at what point do we need to bring in the GI interventions? And I actually think that they can go really, really well together. Depending on really what's going on, but they can help actually complement each other. So we're going to learn more about that today. Like Tamara mentioned, my name is Dr. Heather Finley. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm a gut health specialist, and I'm so passionate about GI because I had my own GI issues, and I struggled for about 20 years with GI symptoms that ultimately led me to feeling super stuck, super confused about food, super at war with my body. And I never want anybody else to feel that way. So I've made it my mission to help as many individuals as possible be able to navigate their GI issues and love food again and not restrict food. And so I'm so glad you're here. I'm the founder of the Gut Together program. This is a digestive health program. I'm also the founder of Gut Practitioner, which is a practitioner mentorship where we really unpack the gut and how to apply this with cases. I have a podcast, which is on a pause right now, but we're picking it back up soon. And then I published a book about a year ago. One thing about the book is that it is kind of a gut health manual in the front. So if you're looking for a quick, easy resource for your clients, that might be a good place to start. Okay, so plan for today. We're going to chat about some common GI concerns. Then we're going to talk about the bidirectional pathway and how this applies to your clients. And then we are going to talk about some solutions and case studies. I really appreciated the feedback from last time and how much you all loved the cases. So I kept that as a part of this presentation because that seemed like it was something that was helpful. So really, the goal is that you have success for your clients and also for you as a clinician. There is literally nothing worse than having a client in your office and not knowing how to help them. And so hopefully today leaves you with some tools that you can apply immediately with your clients to feel a bit more confident when it comes to GI. So what I've seen when I'm able to blend GI and disordered eating is improved client retention, less conflict with clients, better compliance to recommendation, less Sunday scaries about going to work. I remember when I had a brick and mortar private practice here in DFW, and I was seeing tons of eating disorder clients and tons of eating disorder clients that had GI issues. I would panic on Sunday night looking at my client roster going, how am I going to help these people that have really severe GI issues? I'm not sure how it goes together. So it can cause a lot of stress. And we're going to talk about stress today. And then confidence with your clients. So hopefully you feel some of that after today. So like I mentioned, today we are looking beyond the plate at how we can support clients with GI issues. And so this really should apply to a lot of different types of clinicians, which is why I'm glad that you're all here. So here are just some common GI complaints. Severe constipation can be one. Stomach pain can be another. Reflux is one I know that we see quite a bit. Poor tolerance to new foods or a meal plan. I wish I could say by show of hands, but just think about this. How many clients have you had that have said, I just don't tolerate that? Or that food doesn't agree with me, or every time I eat that food, this thing happens. This has a lot more to do with someone's gut than it actually has to do with food itself. So what I always tell clients is these symptoms that you're having are little alarm signals telling us that there's something going on. So the solution here is not to cut out more foods, it's to actually fix the gut, and then your tolerance to foods will improve from there. We can have ongoing long-term GI issues, which is what I was describing in the client case that I shared at the beginning. It's very common to have clients succeed in treatment and then have GI issues years later, or just GI issues that don't resolve. You can have painful bloating, inconsistent bowel patterns, and then poor gut motility. So gut motility is just the contraction of the muscles, the ability for the gut to clear itself so someone can have a bowel movement. So what if the source of the stress is the stress? Might be a weird question, but we're really going to hone in today on stress and how that impacts the GI system, going top to bottom and bottom to top, and how we can actually combat this. So stress is a main contributor to GI issues. And I think it's so common for clients to completely become disinterested or unengaged when you tell them, well, you're just stressed. Nobody wants to hear that, right? Have you ever had someone tell you to just calm down when you're really, really mad about something, and then that just makes you more mad, right? So we have to find ways to communicate with our clients about stress in a way that maybe isn't just saying, hey, your body's under stress and that's actually what's causing your GI symptoms. Because the reality is it's not just stress here. There's so many other stressors on the body that are going to contribute to GI issues. So, of course, being in a fight or flight state is going to put the body in stress. But stress impacts our mineral status. We use minerals for so many different metabolic processes in the body. For example, magnesium and potassium, we deplete pretty rapidly when we're stressed. And the interesting part is that potassium and magnesium we both need for gut motility and contraction. And so it can kind of be a catch-22 there. Stress is going to impact the gut-brain connection. So we all have probably had a gut-wrenching experience or had a gut instinct about something. That saying is actually something that does happen in the body. If you've ever gotten nervous before, that is a gut instinct or a gut reaction. And so anytime we're faced with stress or our body perceives stress, that's going to affect digestion. Stress also just decreases salivation. And the most simple way that I can put this is your body is not worried about salivating to digest whatever meal you have in front of you if it perceives a tiger is chasing you. And if you think about that in the context of your eating disorder clients, how often is that happening when they approach a meal that causes them stress? Stress also will decrease stomach acid production. Stomach acid is the first step of chemical digestion. After food is digested in the mouth, stomach acid helps to break down food. And I'm sure you've had a client that has said, "Oh, I just feel like food sits in my stomach like a brick." That typically has to do with delayed emptying and a decrease in stomach acid production, which actually is impacted by minerals. And then stress about being stressed, the question that I asked earlier. So we don't want to cause more stress on someone by saying, well, your body's just stressed and that's why you're having IBS symptoms. We want to find a way to talk about this and give them solutions so that they can actually combat the stress. We'll dig into more of that as we get through this presentation. So I just want to go over a couple studies. The study on the left, titled Psychological Stress and Gut Microbiota Composition. This really is just a review of some of the literature. So the researchers here were just looking at existing literature to help understand how psychological stress impacts the diversity and composition of the gut, which is really interesting. I think oftentimes we do think about how stress decreases digestion, but it also actually impacts the makeup of bacteria in our gut. And we'll get to why that's important in just a little bit. The study on the right, titled Progresses of the Effects and Mechanisms of Stress on the Gut, is really looking at the different mechanisms that are going to impact the gut related to stress. So what they identified was there's several different mechanisms at play. So the neuroendocrine pathway, so the HPA axis, you may be familiar with that, is going to directly influence the gut environment, kind of similar to the previous study. Stress is also going to modulate the immune system, leading to changes in gut permeability. So you may be familiar with the term that floats around on the internet, leaky gut. That's really not actually a clinical diagnosis, but there is such thing as intestinal permeability. And that really greatly affects someone's tolerance to food and also the immune response that they're going to have to food. And so can affect symptoms that a client's having. There's neural communication. So this is referring to the gut-brain axis. It's a bidirectional pathway. And then the microbial metabolites. So if you were here in January, we discussed short chain fatty acids. And what you need to know if you weren't here is that when gut bacteria, so probiotic bacteria, eat prebiotic fiber, they produce something called short chain fatty acids. And these are very beneficial for the gut. They're anti-inflammatory, they help with gut motility, they help with bacterial makeup. And so that's kind of the end goal. And so there's a lot of different mechanisms on the influence of the gut microbiota here. I love this visual because what it's showing is that stress of all kinds impacts the entire digestive process. I think that this is a great visual to show clients that might be ready to see this. Looking at, okay, when you are in a parasympathetic state, so you're in a rest and digest state, look at all the amazing things that are happening. Your heartbeat is slowing down. The activity of your stomach is activated. So stomach acid production, which is then going to actually signal pancreatic enzyme release and bile flow and all the other things that we need for digestion. It's going to stimulate the activity of the intestines. And so we need rest and digest to help us to have proper digestion. On the opposite side, when someone is in a stressed out sympathetic state, it's going to inhibit the activity of the stomach. It's going to inhibit the activity of the intestines. And you can see how this can really become a vicious cycle. So let's hone in on the vagus nerve for just a second. The vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve, and it is the nerve that connects the gut and the brain. And there is a bidirectional communication here. So the cranial nerve is helping to send messages from the brain to the gut and from the gut to the brain. And any dysfunction in the vagus nerve can result in GI issues, mood disorders, inflammation, etc. So this is really a key player when we're talking about the gut-brain axis. And so when the body is under stress, this is going to impact the vagus nerve and the communication that we're having. And the body's not prioritizing GI function when it's under stress. So we, of course, cannot remove all stress, but we can decrease stress in small increments to make GI improvements. And we also can help improve stress tolerance via the gut microbiome, which I'm excited to tell you about today. So this is not news to anybody, but when someone has an eating disorder, food is a threat to the system. And this potential threat increases GI symptoms. So they think that a dog is barking at them. Have you ever been so calm laying on the couch watching TV and then someone knocks on your door and your dog goes nuts? That's what the nervous system is doing when it sits down for a meal and someone's really stressed about food. It's saying, there is an invader we have to attack. And so this is causing GI symptoms, not necessarily because of the food, but because how the body is actually able to digest the food due to being in this stressed out state. So where do we actually start? We're going to discuss 2 ways to support stress in clients with an eating disorder. So improving digestion does not just involve taking a good probiotic. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients come to us saying, well, I went to Whole Foods and I bought the most expensive probiotic that I could find in the refrigerated section, and it made my symptoms worse. How many of you have had that experience, maybe yourself or with your clients? Probiotics can have a time and a place for sure, and I'm going to talk about some of the strains today that can be beneficial. But we have to really think about digestion as a top-down system. We can't just hone in on what's going on in the intestines. There's a lot of different steps that can happen before someone actually even gets food to their intestines. So we want to think about, okay, what's going on up here? How is someone actually secreting stomach acid? How is the whole digestive process? And then how is food moving through the intestines once it gets there? So digestion starts in the mouth with salivary amylase. I believe this is a test question, so you might want to write that down or just star this on your paper. But when digestion is turned off, the entire process shuts down. Salivary amylase. So think of maybe the last time you went to a bakery or your favorite coffee shop and you smelled like fresh muffins or fresh bread or something, and you thought, I was not hungry until I smelled that, and you start salivating. That's the body preparing for digestion. But if all of a sudden you got a really stressful phone call from your boss or maybe a client or something like that, then that whole process is going to stop, which then decreases the rest of the digestive process. So we really start digestion by salivating and how we're thinking about food. When someone has inadequate stomach acid, maybe as a result of being in a stressed out state, maybe as a result of being mineral depleted, maybe as a result of taking a PPI or an acid reducing medication, whatever it might be, there's so many different causes. They may feel like food sits in their stomach like a brick. They may have nausea after meals. They may have slow gut motility, so the contraction of gut muscles. They may have early fullness, so they might eat a couple bites and say, I already feel stuffed. And then they may have poor mineral absorption. So poor mineral absorption is an interesting concept because we need stomach acid to absorb minerals, and then we also need minerals to make stomach acid. So that could be a whole topic in itself. But for the sake of time, we will keep going on. So solution number 1 is we want to think about how can we support digestion from the top down. So from the brain to the gut. That's what we're going to focus on first. Here are 4 things that we really want to focus on with our clients to help improve digestion and also decrease stress on their bodies. So, sleep, time in between meals, stress management, and then gentle movement for gut motility if appropriate. So, let's talk about sleep for a second. This is one of the most commonly missed pieces. I think back to my own GI journey and think if I had just slept, I think I would have been in a lot better shape. But I was definitely the person that thought, "Ah, I can sleep when I'm dead. There's no need to sleep. I'm young. I have the energy." And I think about how that really actually kept me so stuck with GI issues because my body was never actually rested. So when the gut rests and digests, the most is when you are sleeping. So, adequate sleep is huge for digestion. And it may sound simple, but I'm sure you have clients, or maybe you've experienced this yourself, that have a really hard time sleeping. They're either waking up constantly throughout the middle of the night, every 3-ish hours, maybe due to blood sugar issues. Maybe they're waking up at 3 or 4 a.m. They can't fall back asleep. There can be lots of causes for that. Maybe they feel exhausted all day and then they get wired and tired before the evening, and before it's time to go to bed. And they think, why don't I have this energy throughout the day due to stress hormone imbalances? So we have to start with proper sleep hygiene. So morning light exposure is a huge one. Getting 5 to 10 minutes of morning sun in your eyes can make a huge difference in circadian rhythm and sleep. And so that's an easy tool that you could use with clients. If you live in a cloudy place or it's freezing cold, a happy light or something like that can be a great stand in, because ideally we want outside light. Preventing blue light before bed. I think this is a common one that we hear all the time. A good sleep routine to kind of cue the body that it's time to go to bed. This can be super simple. It doesn't have to be this long, extensive routine. And then sleep supportive supplementation if needed. If someone's doing all the basics and they're still not sleeping, magnesium glycinate can be great. L-theanine can be great. And so there are certain sleep supportive supplements that might be appropriate to help someone actually get rest, because that can be a vicious cycle in itself. Stress management. I think I've talked about this quite a bit, but any stress on the body is a threat. So maybe they're not necessarily, they don't feel stressed up here, but maybe their body's under a lot of stress because they're under eating, they're over exercising, they're dehydrated, they're going through a divorce, they have 6 kids and their life is just really busy. Whatever it might be, there can be external stressors and internal stressors. So you can simply, your body can be stressed from not eating enough or over exercising and not recovering. And so I think sometimes explaining that to clients, like, look, you're doing a great job with your stress management, but we have these other stressors that are contributing. So, we want to try to reduce stress at meals if possible. Some really simple tips that we give our clients: humming before meals. We recommend humming happy birthday twice. That can activate the vagus nerve and is going to help reduce stress. Singing, deep breathing, even just 4 deep breaths before a meal can reduce stress. There was a podcast, and I'm forgetting what it was. Hopefully, I can remember before the end of the presentation, but talking all about breath and how much even just proper breathing can really reduce stress on the body and decrease cortisol response. If you were here in January, you already saw this little video, but another way that we can help support digestion from the top down is the migrating motor complex. So we want to give space in between meals to help this migrating motor complex or the intestinal cleanup crew to show up. So ideally 3 to 4 hours in between meals, as long as someone is able to balance their blood sugar, because low blood sugar or high blood sugar can also create more stress. So first step, balancing blood sugar. Second step, being able to space out meals to give the digestive tract a rest and time to actually digest food and move it along in between meals. Movement can be a great way to reduce stress on the body as well and actually improve gut motility and digestion. So, gentle walking actually can stimulate bile flow. We need bile to digest fats. Bile is actually antimicrobial, so it helps to kill off unwanted organisms in the body. So walking 5 minutes after a meal can be great if someone really struggles with digestion or bloating. Yoga for digestion, the I Love You massage, there's tons of YouTube videos showing you how to do this, but anything that we can do to just relieve stress. I explain to our clients that stress is kind of like a tea kettle. So our tea kettle is boiling and we need to release the steam every once in a while so it doesn't completely boil over. And so little stress management things throughout the day can be a great way to do this. Okay. So solution number 2, and maybe information that is new to you, maybe solution number 1 was not new, maybe this one is there is a way that we actually can support digestion from the bottom up. And this is the piece that I think is missing the most when it comes to eating disorder treatment. We do a really good job of incorporating stress management into treatment protocols, talking about stress with our clients, maybe even getting on medicine to help with stress. But we don't ever think about how is their gut actually contributing to stress. And we have so much research now on how the gut actually impacts stress. So I hope that this is helpful to you. So as much as stress up top impacts digestion down below, the pathway runs both ways. And so if we really want to make significant progress with our clients, we have to look at it both ways so that it will change. So just a couple studies that might be interesting to you. So this first study on the left, it's titled Microbiota Gut-Brain Axis, Interaction of Gut Microbes and Their Metabolites with Host Epithelial Barriers. That is a mouthful. But what this study is really explaining and looking at is the relationship between the microbiota gut-brain axis and focusing on how gut microbes and their metabolites, like short-chain fatty acids, interact with the host epithelial barriers. So the gut lining, going back to that conversation about intestinal permeability and leaky gut. And so this really highlights this understanding that the bidirectional communication is impacted by the makeup of the gut composition as well as the metabolites that it produces. And so this is really significant when we think about mood disorders and trying to reduce stress on the body. This second study on the right is looking at this specific strain of probiotic called Bifidobacterium longum 1714. And this is a class of probiotic that is technically called a psychobiotic. I believe last year I gave a presentation specifically on probiotics and prebiotics, and I introduced this topic of psychobiotics. But this research is really just investigating the potential effects of this specific strain of probiotic on stress, electrophysiology, and neurocognition, and how this specific strain actually is shown to reduce stress, which is so interesting, right? And so you're seeing more and more products on the market targeted as a stress probiotic that actually have this strain of bacteria in it. Just 2 more studies. So the one on the left here, titled The Gut Microbiome and Mental Health Implications for Anxiety and Trauma-Related Disorders. This is looking at the relationship between the gut microbiome and mental health. And they're reviewing the literature just to look at these different connections. And so really highlighting the importance of the gut-brain connection when it comes to mental well-being. And then this last study here on the right is looking specifically at the vagus nerve and the microbiota gut-brain axis. And really what it's discussing is how the vagus nerve is this crucial link between the central nervous system and the gut microbiota, and how we can use this as a therapeutic intervention for various neurological and psychiatric disorders, which is so interesting. So you can explore these studies a bit more. There's many more studies that I can share, but just wanted to pull a few. So let's hone in on psychobiotics for just a second. Psychobiotics, by definition, are live microorganisms or they can be non-digestible fibers, which are prebiotics, that when consumed in adequate amounts, confer mental health benefits through interactions with the gut microbiota brain axis, which is so, so cool. So how this happens is psychobiotics exert their effects by changing the gut microbiota composition, so the population of bacteria in the gut, and the production of neurotransmitters and short-chain fatty acids, such as butyrate, which help to reduce inflammation in the gut and the brain. So we can see improvements with sleep, cognition, stress response, etc. So here are just some of the psychobiotics that are studied that we can use. They're mouthfuls to say. So Bifidobacterium 1714, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, and then Bifidobacterium longum. There are also prebiotics that show the same effect. So FOS and GOS prebiotics, so fructo-oligosaccharide and galacto-oligosaccharide, as well as inulin. So any product that has any of these probiotic strains as well as prebiotics can be really significant in changing the composition of the gut bacteria and influencing the gut-brain connection. Here are just some other impacts on the gut-brain connection. So an imbalance of good and bad bacteria. I like to explain your gut like a parking lot. So if you have a huge parking lot in your gut and there's lots of empty spaces because maybe someone's been on a restricted diet for a long time and they just don't have an adequate amount of bacteria in their gut, good or bad, that can be a problem. But there also can be an instance where maybe there's too many bad guys filling up the parking spaces. And so we want as many good guys to come in and fill up these parking spaces to crowd out any bad. Poor digestion. So kind of going back to the stomach acid conversation, if someone can't digest their food very well, it's going to sit in the gut and it's going to ferment and it's going to produce gases that we don't want and lead to kind of this cyclical symptom cascade that a lot of our clients have. The stress response, of course, we know from research that stress actually does change the composition of the gut microbiota. And interestingly enough, there are studies looking at a specific marker in the gut immune system. It's called immunoglobulin secretory IgA. And this actually can be decreased by negative thought patterns. And this specific marker is really helpful for keeping the gut healthy, preventing that intestinal permeability, and kind of these food intolerances that can happen. Poor short-chain fatty acid production, and then inflammation in the gut. All these things are going to impact the gut-brain connection. So I believe, and I've seen, that we can make greater strides with patients when we improve the pathway bidirectionally. So we continue doing what we're doing and promote stress reduction as much as possible. But what's going to happen when we start actually supporting the gut in a way that helps this pathway work much better? Here's just another interesting graphic that I thought would be interesting to put in here so you can see that it's both ways. So we have stressors that are impacting the gut, but all of this going on down here is impacting brain function. And depending on what research you look at, it says that up to 80 or 90% of what's going on in the gut is the communication up to the brain versus like 20% is going down. So if you think about how strong that gut instinct that you've ever had, that nervousness or running to the bathroom because you have a presentation or whatever it might be, think about how strong that is. And if that's only 20% of it, what's going on the other way? And so we really want to prioritize our gut health. So beyond the plate, what is there evidence for? There's evidence for spore-based probiotic supplementation to help improve that parking lot mentality or the parking lot makeup. Prebiotic fiber support to help with improving the probiotic actually staying in the gut, and then psychobiotic strains as well. So we can see here a lot of the things that I've discussed today. So the migrating motor complex, vagus nerve stimulation, decreasing stress around food, blood sugar balance, dietary diversity, and meal hygiene, they're going to help all the things that your clients are struggling with. There's no thing that I've listed that's going to hurt someone if they have GI issues and are struggling with food fear as well, or disordered eating, or whatever it might be. So let's chat about a case study, and then I think we'll be good on time to do some questions. Okay, so this is a case study. So um, this is a individual identifying as she, her, diagnosed with binge eating disorder. She has PCOS as well as IBS. I'm sure you've had a client very similar situation. Especially if you work in treatment or even an outpatient, it's very common to have clients that struggle with more than one thing. She experiences alternating constipation and diarrhea, as well as reflux. And then she has perceived food intolerances. So she says, well, every time I eat this food, I have this symptom, or I could eat something one day and I feel fine, and then the next day I don't, which is a common thing as well. And so, maybe you have clients that say stuff like that to you, or maybe you even have clients that have done food sensitivity testing and it comes back, with every single food that they eat every single day. Going back to the gut immune system, that's the actual cause of that. When the gut immune system is impacted, you will have these immune reactions. So the solution is actually fixing the gut immune system. So she follows a limited diet due to research done on PCOS and this quote unquote food addiction that she thinks she experiences. Her weight is restored. She expresses a desire to lose weight because she's been told that the only way to manage her PCOS is weight loss, which we all know is not the case. And then she has significant stress in her life due to changes in her home life. So, lots going on with this patient, lots of places that we can start, both to help with binge eating disorder as well as this alternating constipation and diarrhea. So, here are some things that we want to think about as we're supporting her top down and down up. So, meal balance. We know how much blood sugar balance impacts PCOS and just health in general. So, we really want to focus on meal balance, protein, fats, carbohydrates at meals to make sure her blood sugar is staying stable and not causing more stress on her system. We want to normalize meal times and help that migrating motor complex to actually show up. For someone like this, I would definitely recommend some kind of sun fiber or ZOS, GOS, FOS prebiotic. The reason that I listed all of these, and I'll dig into this really quickly, is sun fiber can be a great starting point. But for some of these psychobiotic benefits, we'd want to advance to maybe one of the GOS or FOS prebiotics. So you could start with sun fiber, make sure that the client is tolerating this really well. And then you could advance to using something like Bimuno, which is a GOS prebiotic, to help kind of that gut composition and gut brain interaction. We want to utilize ginger or magnesium for constipation and diarrhea. I know I've talked about this in many other presentations, but when we see this alternating constipation and diarrhea, most of the time, this actually indicates severe constipation. So, going days without a bowel movement and then all of a sudden having diarrhea typically means this is called overflow diarrhea. And so, we want to make sure we get the bowels moving every day. Ginger and magnesium can be a great combination for this, specific to this type of client. There's a potential use for spore-based probiotics, or maybe even adding in this Bifido 1714 strain. There's a product that I like called Zen Biome Cope that has this strain in it, which is really helpful. Definitely working around stress and body image. And then circadian rhythm. We know that adequate sleep and good sleep hygiene is going to be really, really helpful. And then, especially with the PCOS diagnosis as well, there's many other benefits too related to blood sugar, etc. Okay, because I don't want to cause more stress on your system, since we just talked about how much stress impacts your digestion, here are the quiz answers to just decrease the stress of your afternoon. But Tamara, I think we have some time for some questions, if there are any. And I know many of you have already downloaded this, but if you want a digestive checklist that you can use with your clients, it's literally kind of step by step. It's just a Google Doc that you can save. You can scan this or go to this website and download it. Once you enter your email, it will send it to you. And so I'm happy to share that with you if you would find it helpful. But thank you for joining. Please reach out to me on Instagram with any questions that you have. I'd love to hear more about you in chat, but let's get to some questions.
Wonderful. Heather, can you hear me and see me? My screen
Yeah.
is being wonky. Okay, great. Thank you. We have a ton of questions, as you can imagine. We'll try to get to as many as we can before we hop off at the top of the hour. Before we do that, I just want to remind folks about the survey and the quiz. So, excuse me. So there's a survey that will pop up in this same screen where we are right now. When I turn off the webinar, the evaluation will pop up on the screen. If you would just take a couple of minutes to fill that out, we would appreciate it. It's completely anonymous, so feel free to be candid in your feedback. That's a continuing education requirement for us, that we tabulate those results and send those to the CE approval entities. So if you would do that, we'd appreciate it. And then in a separate screen that will pop up will be the link to take the online test. You must take the test online in order to receive continuing education credit. Once you pass the test, then the CE certificate will be available for you to download. All right, questions are still coming in, Heather, so bear with me as I get to my notes. Let's go there. Okay, this first question is from Anonymous. What about when someone has celiac and an eating disorder? By nature, they have to restrict their food, which could be very triggering.
Yes. We work with a lot of clients that have celiac and or wheat allergies, which actually is the case for me. So it can be very triggering. Unfortunately, with celiac, it is the recommendation that they should avoid gluten because it can be very damaging to the gut. So I always like to get a therapist on board to make sure that they're supported there and just grieve that, because that's a loss, right? It's something that is permanent. You cannot reverse celiac disease, unfortunately. And so grieving that loss and supporting that process, I think, is really helpful. And then finding really, really great alternatives outside of that. But that is a really, really tricky situation because it is one of the few times in which you would want to recommend food restriction, because I don't remember the percent off the top of my head, but when someone has celiac disease, the likelihood that they develop another autoimmune disease is pretty high, especially if left unaddressed and there's tons of damage to the microvilli of the gut, which is what happens with celiac. So hopefully that's
Thank you. Stacy asked, when the vagus nerve is engaged and physical symptoms occur, how can you stop that process once the GI symptoms kick in?
I love this question. So I think trying to reduce stress in the moment. And so one thing that we work with our clients a lot on is nervous system regulation tools that they can do regardless of what situation they're in. And so we partner actually with someone who's a nervous system specialist on this, and she provides just some quick videos on, okay, if you're in a meeting and you're really stressed, here's something you can do that's discreet, that's going to reduce stress. And so this could look like tapping. This could look like taking a couple deep breaths. If you're not in a public situation, this could look like, shaking. There's so many different tools that you can use to help decrease the stress in the moment. And so I always like to give clients just a toolbox that they can refer to in those times.
Thank you. Nancy asks, what can someone do if they depend on a PPI to prevent GERD systems if following a GERD-friendly diet is not enough?
So this might be kind of controversial, but my opinion would be to get off the PPI and figure out why you need the PPI. PPIs were actually invented because they were meant to be a short-term solution, not a long-term solution. And so we've had clients that have come to us on PPIs for 20 years, and they have been told, you're never going to get off the PPI. And that's so not true. There's something causing the reflux. Sometimes it's actually low stomach acid that's causing the reflux due to this regurgitation. Sometimes it's H. pylori. We really want to dig in and figure out what's causing it, because following a really restrictive GERD diet is potentially going to add some stress. But then also, we know that when we lower stomach acid, it impacts the whole digestive process. And so, if we're already starting off not breaking down our food well via stomach acid, then it's not getting broken down properly by the time it ends up in the intestines. So, it's common to see clients that have acid reflux and are on acid reducing medications also have SIBO, bloating, other GI complaints, and it's all connected. They're not separate.
Got it. Thank you. Holly asked, Holly said, Heather, what would you suggest as an intervention for a client with an eating disorder who isn't sleeping well related to the waking up due to low blood sugar? What would some interventions include?
We see this a lot as well. We typically have our clients eat a protein and carb balanced snack before bed to help their blood sugar regulate throughout the night. So I know that goes against like what you will hear on the internet, right? Like, don't eat past this certain time. Definitely can be helpful to eat something that's rich in protein and has some carbohydrate as well before bed. We have clients eat all sorts of things, yogurt and fruit, eggs, and some fruit, whatever they like, sweet, salty, whatever. Something that's going to help balance blood sugar. And then it goes back to, are they eating enough during the day? Are they eating enough macronutrient balance throughout the day? So starting with the pre-bed snack, but also assessing what's going on throughout the day. Are they, not eating in the morning and then eating a bunch later on in the day? That can be a contributor. So digging into that as well.
Thank you. It's interesting because we had a couple of questions right back to back that were very similar. I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. It's either Raylan or Raylan and Kevin both asked similar questions. What have you found to be the best techniques to get your clients to accept these interactions and implement them in their lifestyle or diet? Kevin said, how do you find clients' receptiveness to learning science about gut health as opposed to their quote plan of simply restricting?
I think it depends on the client and it depends on what's motivating them. But most of the time, by the time clients get to us, they're so sick of being on a restrictive diet and still not feeling well that they're open to doing other things, but it's still scary. It doesn't mean they're like, okay, cool, I'm just going to go eat whatever I want because this isn't working anyways. It's still scary. Oftentimes I ask the question, do you actually feel any better eating, so few foods? And they're like, oh, wait, actually I don't, and so sometimes it can be journaling exercises around their fear of actually changing different things. Sometimes it can be explaining the science to them. We work with a lot of very intelligent people that want to understand, oh, I didn't realize that microbes in the gut are picky. And so when I eat the same 5 things, my parking lot is super empty. And so when I actually eat more variety, my parking lot is full, AKA the gut composition. And so I think it depends on the client and how they learn, but it can either be digging into some of their fears around changing, is what you're doing actually working, explaining the science, and going slow. It never helps someone to give them this huge, long plan and feeling like they can't be successful at it. So it's very easy to want to give people all the information on the first session, but most of the time that just results in inaction. So, okay, what's one thing that you can do right now and helping them to feel confident and successful in that?
Thank you. Kelsey asks, how long do you typically see GI health disruptions after recovery? Or how long would we assume this takes to recover the gut?
It's all over the place. We have clients that come to us that were fine for 5 years, and then all of a sudden they have a really stressful event in their life and everything just kind of triggers. And there's obviously multiple mechanisms at play there because stress, even like food poisoning or going on a vacation that they get constipated and don't go to the bathroom for 10 days, whatever it might be, that can trigger things, but it's a domino effect, right? So if they were already starting out with a gut that was kind of hanging on, and then something triggers them and the dominoes fall over. So I would say it I don't have a direct answer for that because we work with people that are like right out of treatment. Like we have a client right now that she's doing really well. She's still working with her therapist. She's doing really good. And she just finished treatment. And then we have a lot of clients that it's years down the road. So, and that like it could be changes in hormones. I mean, there's so many different
So many
things.
factors. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Mackenzie said, I have a lot of clients come to treatment with food sensitivity test results showing IgG responses to lots of foods and believing that they can't eat those foods. How do you help clients understand those results?
I'm so glad you asked. This is my favorite question to answer
Yay, because it's the
because
last one. So
perfect. So food sensitivity tests are very accurate and inaccurate. And what I mean by that is what's happening is the more you eat something, the more your immune system is exposed to a food antigen. So, if we're going back to the concept of intestinal permeability, we can think of our gut like a cheesecloth, right? So, we are filtering out large particles when we use a cheesecloth. Well, what happens, and this is top of mind because I have a puppy, but what happens if your puppy comes and chews holes in the cheesecloth and you're trying to use the cheesecloth and big particles are getting through, right? It's not going to work. That's what happens when our intestines become leaky, or really the clinical term permeable. And so the more particles that are unwanted that are getting through that cheesecloth, it's going to cause an immune chaos response. And so that's why most of the time when clients are under eating, they're under a lot of stress, they're eating the same 5 foods, whatever it might be, their immunoglobulin A, which I mentioned in the presentation, I saw was another question, that number is really low. And therefore, their food sensitivities are higher. So they have more food sensitivities because that immunoglobulin, there's not enough of it to actually wrap around the food protein and tell the immune system, hey, we're good. Like, we don't need to cause a reaction to this. And so I think explaining that to clients can be really helpful. Of like, yeah, your immune system's reacting, but the problem actually isn't the food, it's your gut immune system. And so if we fix the gut immune system, then we can fix the food sensitivities.
thank you. We have a ton of questions that, of course, we weren't able to get to today. So I will tell you all that you can reach out to Heather directly. Her Instagram page, she has a zillion followers, but you can DM her there and I know she'll respond as soon as she can if you have a burning question that we couldn't get to today. So feel free to reach out to Heather directly. Again, a reminder, when I end the webinar here in just a second, you'll see the survey that will pop up in the current screen that you're looking at now. And then there'll be a second tab that will pop up with a link to take the online test. My thanks again to Dr. Heather Finley for being with us today and for all of you to take time out of your busy schedules to be with us. And we hope we see you again next time. Take care.
Thank you.